Hello, everyone, and welcome to our pre-concert talk for the North State Symphony's final concert of 2020. My name is Scott Seaton. I'm the music director of the North State Symphony, and it is a real pleasure to be here with you all this evening to chat about everything that you can expect this week for this very special celebration of Beethoven and the 250 years that he has been a presence in this world, in this universe. So yes, a few days ago, he was born 250 years ago. The exact date is a little bit uncertain. There's a few stories and myths here and there, but nonetheless, it was most likely the 16th or the 17th. That aside, it's so great to be here with you all on December 22nd for a December 24th virtual premiere of our Beethoven 250, 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And it'll be so nice to join you all in your homes on that evening in particular, especially as we're all not able to do too much else in this time that we're living. And we certainly can't wait more than anyone to be back in the concert hall and to be able to present our live programs. But in the meantime, we're so happy to be able to do something for you, to keep music alive, to keep to be continuously engaged with you all. So yes, thank you so much for being here. And I want to start off by thanking our wonderful pre-talk sponsor, and that is Richard and Pat Macias, two wonderful people who have done so much for the symphony. And without them, I wouldn't be here talking to you all. So Richard and Pat, thank you so much. You're both amazing. And with that, I also want to thank Dignity Health for our season sponsorship. I want to throw out a special thanks to Sam and Sam Hilaire for their sponsoring of this month's concert, and also an extreme shout out to the rest of our months of music sponsors, which is Nina Perry, Dan Bertzer, Patty and Gary Mullet, Elsie McIntaggart, and James Malin. All of you have been so incredible in these months to help keep music alive and well in the North State. So thank you so much. Now, to begin this talk this evening, I actually have a pre-recorded video that I'm going to start out with. This video that you're about to watch was going to be part of the virtual premiere, but it ended up being a more interesting conversation and too long for the premiere itself. So I'm going to start out by playing that for you all. It's a conversation between myself and our concertmaster, Terry Bond, about Beethoven. And in particular, we were trying to be as broad as we could, because this virtual premiere actually starts with a little game, a little contest. And in this contest, you're going to have a chance to guess, or maybe some of you are very informed about most of the Beethoven string quartets, but you're going to have a chance to place 11 different short Beethoven string quartet excerpts into appropriate periods of his life, his early quartets, his middle quartets, and his late quartets. And that's going to be live on Christmas Eve, and then we're going to accept responses up until Monday. And then we're going to have some incredible prizes for those who both turn them in early and who get the most responses correct. So you have that to look forward to. So to chat about Beethoven and specifically his string quartets and what you can expect with each of the three periods, I'm going to start a little conversation for you by, again, myself and our amazing concertmaster, Terry Bond. So please bear with me, and hopefully there's no technical glitches as I put this on. Now, how do you talk about an icon such as Beethoven? He's a household name that had a very interesting life, least of which because he was a composer, a musician, who in the later part of his life could hear absolutely nothing.
It's sort of legend that his father wanted him to be another Mozart, There are a lot of stories about him, about Dad forcing him to practice the piano and having ideas of taking him on tours that never materialized. My own research makes me think some of that was true, but I think it's been kind of, it's really hard sometimes to untangle the truth of Beethoven's life from all his stories because he is so iconic, and also because his first biographer, Schindler, was kind of a liar, really, and told a lot of stories about him that seemed to get legs and last that really weren't true.
I mean, there's even a question about how old is Beethoven really?
Yeah, right, exactly. And there's this whole legend too about him trying to go to Vienna the first time when he was about 18, and wanting to study with Mozart, and then not being able to because his mother was struck ill, and he got this message that he needed to return home as quickly as possible, so he wasn't really able to connect with Mozart, which we now know is actually doesn't fit with the evidence at all, because records of the inns show that it actually took him like 6 weeks to get home. He stopped off for a couple of job interviews on the way, and the source for that story is a letter that he wrote to someone that he owed a lot of money. And so he basically said, "I'm so sorry, I can't pay you back because my mother was dying and I had to run home from Vienna to see her." That's the only piece of evidence for that story. So this is kind of what happens with Beethoven lore. It's actually, there are layers. But clearly he was very, very talented from a very early age. And he was in what we call the early period of his life. He was really on track to become a performer-composer, like Mozart, in that way. He was a fabulous pianist, did a lot of performing with his own music, and then we had this tragedy of him losing his hearing, which stopped him from performing, really, because he couldn't hear what he was doing.
Absolutely.
Which is so sad.
So, in his formative years, and a lot of people know that he went on back to Vienna to study with Franz Joseph Haydn.
Mm-hmm.
The irony there is, that was his great teacher, but he really didn't take his lessons with him too seriously. I mean, I'm sure he got tidbits and fragments here and there, a better scope of like sonata form and the big structure as a whole.
Yeah.
But well, one thing he did, I think, get from Haydn is that embedded sense of humor in a lot of the music.
Yeah. No, I totally would agree.
Look at his first symphony, starting with something completely off the track, not a tonic chord at all, just something no one would expect. And in his quartets, so in Haydn's music, Haydn was the father of the string quartet. Him and Mozart both have a long tradition of this serious music, and of course Haydn tried to make it a little less so. But Beethoven took it to a whole new level.
Yeah, very much.
And what's funny is that he didn't really start writing quartets until he was late as a composer. He was in his late 20s when he wrote his first 6 quartets. Same as his symphonies. He didn't really catch either of those bugs until, think about Mozart when he wrote an opera or a symphony for the first time. He was in his Beethoven
was no child prodigy. He really wasn't.
He worked hard.
As a composer, he worked very hard, and also I think he had the shadow of Mozart and Haydn hanging over his head. Really, I think we've talked before in other talks about Schumann labeling Brahms as the successor to Beethoven and how that sort of hung over Brahms' head and he couldn't write a symphony for decades because he was afraid he would be unfairly compared to Beethoven. And I think Beethoven, when he went to Vienna, he had that same kind of issue with Mozart and Haydn. I mean, his homies in Bonn sent him off to Vienna, and there's this quote, this famous quote that I can't remember who exactly it was that said, but like basically like, we send you off to receive the spirit of Mozart at the hands of Haydn, have at it. Yeah, and so I mean I think he deliberately stayed away from the form of string quartet until he was really sure that he'd be able to come out with something that would really stand up to Haydn and Mozart. He actually wrote string trios first.
Right.
Yeah, and they're definitely, obviously studies for the string quartets.
Right, right. And whatever shadow was cast on Beethoven by Haydn and Mozart with the string quartet pales in comparison to the shadow Beethoven left on composers like Brahms and really most who followed in the late 1800s and even beyond that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first set of quartets is easily just him getting his feet wet. Most of them are very light. Yeah,
I feel they do stand up to Haydn and Mozart, but they also stand with Haydn and Mozart very much. I mean, his early period, he's really refining his craft, as you said, and just not really breaking a lot of barriers yet. He's doing some interesting things. He's poking at the barriers.
He's poking at the barriers. I mean, for the non-classical listener, this would be the set of quartets that is the elevator music quartets.
Yeah.
There's nothing. They're great. There's nothing superbly outstanding about them.
Right.
If you compare them to his own late quartets.
Fair to say.
Which, if you many people say that Opus 131 is like it for string quartets, or even it for classical music as a whole. So that's a huge leap. I mean, we're talking about mid-20s versus the last 3 years of his life. So he's already experienced a lot at this point. But let's backtrack. So we go from his early Mozart and Haydn inspired sort of, this is how you write a string quartet, I can do it too. And then he stops for about 5 years.
Yeah, and this is the point at which shortly after he finished the Opus 18 quartets, the early quartets, was when he realized that his hearing was really going and that he was not going to be able to be a performer composer. And so, I mean, he had this kind of insight that he needed to simply focus on composing.
Right.
That was his life, and which was fairly unusual at that time, right? I mean, most composers were also performers. I think it's fair to say that. So he himself said to one of his friends, I am going down a new path. He used that term, new path, and so I mean, he very deliberately decided, I need to pursue composition single-mindedly, and so I mean, what I feel about the middle group, the middle quartets, and his, you can see him just. I mean, he expands the forms to the utmost degree.
Yeah, the Razumovsky quartets are at least twice as long than anything, even his early symphonies, the third aside. But, I mean, that was extraordinary. People thought at first it was just a giant joke. Like, why would you write something so long, so ridiculous?
Yeah, exactly. He expands the forms hugely. He goes to keys that really had not been used since Bach, I would say. There's sections in the Razumovsky quartets where he spends like literally minutes on a seventh chord. So he stretches out the tension. I mean, these tonic, dominant, tonic, these progressions that we talk about, they're all about tension and release. And what Beethoven does in his middle period is he starts stretching the amount of tension that's in his music, almost beyond endurance, really.
His middle quartets come right after the famous Heiligstadt Testament. So when he wrote about, I don't know if I can press on, I don't know if I can do this, but it's my art that keeps me going. It's what I have to say. In the middle period, in his middle quartets, we have more movements and more quartets quartets as a whole that had a darker feel to them.
Yeah.
More use of chromaticism, in addition to this massive expanse that these quartets now have. And it's really a transitional period to what his late quartets would become. I mean, his last quartet in the middle period, which people call, what he called the Serioso, starts off. I mean, you can tell that's going somewhere.
Serious,
I mean, it's intense.
Yeah. And it's the only short one of the middle.
Yeah, like 20 minutes, something like that. It's crazy. So from here, he stops again. You know, the bulk of the middle quartets were commissioned by the Count Razumovsky. And then he stopped doing quartets for, I think, 13 years, or at least more than a decade.
Yeah, quite a while. And I kind of think it's worth noting that he really viewed his string quartets primarily as not vehicles for the concert hall at all, but vehicles for the soiree and for the initiated, in a sense. I mean, he very clearly wrote for a room full of people who would appreciate the subtleties of what he was doing. When you play those late quartets, I feel like they're almost just written for the ages, or written for the future. It's something like, sometimes it's a similar feeling when, as violinists, when we play the Bach sonatas and partitas, that you have this sense that these are just bigger than performance, that they're just really about the meaning of life. And I feel that way about the late quartets. I'm not sure that, because Beethoven was a very practical composer throughout most of his life. Most of his work was either written for a specific purpose or at least designed in some way. He was very practical. But I really can't see my way to applying that to the late quartets. They just really feel like things that he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, he said a lot too. It was 53 plus years of life experience and pain going into these quartets, from his deafness to all of the struggles he had with his nephew Carl, and some would say he was a little overbearing in that relationship. But so he had a lot of personal things going on. And you would mention that, especially as we get to the late quartets, it's this incredible tension between a forward-thinking composer and someone who's reflecting on the past, someone who's reflecting on Bach and Handel, and bringing these intricate idea of singular melodic lines and how they are in opposition to each other by using a lot more feeble writing, a lot more intense counterpoints.
Yeah. And so what happens is the voices become so much more equal when you listen to the early quartets. You definitely do usually feel like you can hear who the melody person is. It's probably the first violin most of the time in the early quartets.
With a nice backup from the other three.
With some great support. And then by the time you get to the middle quartets, the voices are already a lot more equally important in the process, and I feel like you're usually still aware of a melody line, but it's definitely not mostly the first violin anymore. It's really much more equally distributed. But then, by the time you get to the late quartets, it's a different way of putting things together, and you start to not really hear a melody supported by accompaniment so much as you just hear four individual lines doing things that mesh in a really incredible way.
Exactly. And it's almost as if, because you have all this opposition, of course he's doing things like the Ninth Symphony as well, where he's had the brotherhood and the coming together themes in these quartets. The powerful moments come when the four musicians finally do play together. when that unison happens, that's when, this is something important to listen to.
Right.
So it's very vastly different from the early writing in that respect. So, and some of the, we have Opus 135, which has some of the most sublime, simple, slow movement writing to things like the Grosse Fuge, which is just not only a marathon to listen to, but to play. I mean, you have stories of violence, just completely exhausted at the end and just walking off stage after.
Right.
To think that was part, and still is played as part sometimes, as a much longer string quartet.
Yeah, to be the last movement of a 6-movement piece in the Grosse Fuge, which, today people usually, more often than not, just play it by itself.
And it's beyond me how he could have done.
Maybe
that's part of his enclosed world that he couldn't really see past.
And but it really is, like we were talking the other day about it. I mean, that is actually one of my absolute favorite things that I've ever done in my life, is perform the Opus 130 with the Grosse Fuge as the last movement. And it's, for me, it's kind of like, it's maybe, sort of like doing Mahler 2, or, I mean, there are these massive orchestral works too that take over an hour that you're just like pretty much dead by the time you finish them, but you wouldn't want to lose 5 minutes of that experience, right? I mean, that's how I feel about the 130 with the original last movement. But what tells you what a great composer Beethoven really was, is that having been told, okay, dude, this is like just too much, you need to write an alternative finale for this quartet or else it's never going to fly. And he basically said, okay, fine. And he writes a finale with a different character that's more palatable, you might say. But every device that he uses in the Grosse Fuge is in the alternative finale.
Right.
It's like, it's all there. It's just, he just so clearly goes, okay, I gave you too much, you couldn't handle that. I'll just give you a little miniature version then that will suit your little brain and you'll be happy.
Doesn't he even write on the manuscript, this is it, or something similar?
Yeah, something like that.
This is it! Exclamation point.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a wonderful movement too. It's great stuff. Yeah.
So there's so much that goes into Beethoven, and it's generally speaking very difficult in some moments of even his middle, early, and late quartets to figure out which one is which. But there's definitely a lot of clues, and we hope that this little tidbit into his life, this little conversation, helps you in what's to follow, where you actually have to decide, does this fit in the early part where it's more of the Haydn Mozart? Does this fit into this transitional period of quartets, his middle period where it's more of, okay, I'm starting to lose my hearing, yet I'm a musician? Or does it fit into the late quartets where there's no rules anymore.
Yeah.
It's just whatever you want to do. Everyone's against everyone. But at the same time, it's some of the most sublime coming together music you can possibly think of. There you have it. So that was a sort of a lead-in to Thursday's game that's going to start the virtual premiere. And again, there's going to be 11 excerpts, around a minute in each, and you're going to have to guess if they're in the early period, the middle period, or the late period. The early period is our 6 quartets that he wrote when he was roughly 28 years old, starting in 1798. And then he stopped composing quartets for 6 years, but had a very robust compositional time. And then did his Razumovsky quartet, and then waited many more years, 13 years, before he composed all of the incredible music that is the late quartets. But on Christmas Eve, we're going to play one of his we're going to play in full one of his early quartets. This is the meat of the concert, the beginning to end. This is what's going to put you in the Christmas spirit, or at least one of the pieces. There may be a little surprise after the Beethoven is done to help you with your holiday cheer, so you have that to look forward to. But Opus 18 number 2 is a quartet in G major. And again, he wrote it when he was 28 years old, which, if you think about it, is really late for all of these great composers. But Beethoven was no prodigy, as we just talked about. He worked very hard for everything he did. And these quartets as a whole are a great homage to the style, the writings of Franz Joseph Haydn, and even to Mozart. So these series of quartets were composed to fulfill a commission by Prince Joseph Franz Maximilian Labowitz. And he was the employer of one of Beethoven's violinist friends by the name of Karl Amanda. Now, you may know that Beethoven came to Vienna to study with Haydn. He actually came one time before, about 6 years prior to that, when he was just a youngster, about 16 years old. And he spent a very small amount of time with Mozart, but had to leave ultimately because his mom was ill and he had to hurriedly go back home. And then a few years later, after that sort of failed trip with Mozart, at this time around, Mozart was gone at that point. And in 1792, Beethoven went back to Vienna. This time, he was armed with a letter by Count Waldstein, very famous name you might know because he was a huge supporter of Beethoven's, commissioned much music. But this letter basically told Haydn that you need to hear this fellow. You need to teach him everything you know. Count Waldstein believed that Haydn took in Mozart's spirit, but really Beethoven was the one that would take it home and embody it. And that's really what happened, especially in these early quartets. So now he's in Vienna and he's studying with Haydn, but it's a troubled relationship. There's a lot of tension. Beethoven is this young know-it-all, and Haydn is this refined character who's writing these amazingly, almost at times elitist. At least that's the way it sounds in his especially his string quartet writing. But he's ultimately a comedian at heart. There's a lot of wit, a lot of sarcasm, a lot of sense of humor in Haydn's music, and that spills over into Beethoven's music. But Beethoven does study with him in a sense, but also goes on to find more of a teacher, more of a pedagogue, and briefly studies with a composer, even albeit less than Franz Joseph Haydn, but by the name of Johann Albrecht Berger. And what he got from this composer was mostly the study of polyphony and how various voices interact with each other, and also counterpoint and fugue, which would really come into play in his late quartets. But this, Opus 18 number 2 in G major, this is the quartet of bows. It's pristine, it's courtly in the opening, it has an air of politeness, but there's also a lot of parody, a lot of this sense of humor that you would ultimately see in much of Beethoven's music, just like you would in a lot of Haydn's music, aka the Surprise Symphony. But in the opening of the first movement, you can imagine this, walking into like a ballroom, and these airs, these introductions, these traditions, these formalities, and almost just like this facade and this sense of stuffiness. But it's short-lived. You have the beginning was yum yum, and little rest, and then these short little quirky notes, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. It's like an invitation to the dance almost. So that's how it begins. Now, this movement is in sonata form, and if you've come to my pre-concert talks before, you've heard this term a lot. Sonata form is it for most of the early classical composers, and most, up through Romantic period and beyond. Sonata form just means you're hearing three parts in the movement, and you'll hear one thing, one idea, and then in the middle part, this idea is twisted and turned and manipulated, and then it comes back, ideally in the home key that you first heard it in, which in this case is G major, and also just mostly a complete statement of the ideas. And that's how sonata form generally goes. So yeah, there's a lot of humor in this movement. It's got some Haydn-like na 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 type moments. You hear it. I mean, it's very, very obvious. So listen for that. In the recap, in the moment where this form is supposed to come back to the opening, it comes back in the wrong key at first. It's an E flat, not G major, so a little bit far away. So there is this search for G major, and all the instruments quietly start tiptoeing around. And all of a sudden, there's this childlike enthusiasm that begins in the cello. The cello just bursts in like dum, pum, pim, very sort of confident and boisterous. And the other three players are like, oh, geez, let's do our own thing. Well, they'll figure it out. We'll catch up. But eventually, they all meet. They all come together, and the obnoxious cellist is kind of pushed aside, but then taken back in. It's a really funny moment, so listen for that. Before I chat about the second movement, I just want to play you a snippet of what you can expect in the first movement on Thursday. So here is that. Yeah, especially that one part, that bom bom p blum. It's just mocking the whole thing. I mean, in the upper strings, it's very funny. Then we go on to the second movement, which is more noble, more refined. It seems to be asking questions in the beginning, and then this childlike sense of impatience again emerges. And it's almost like there's this shiny ball in the next room that must be explored. And so then we go on to this Haydn-like scherzo, except we're not in that movement yet. So it's this very bizarre interruption into this very sort of deeper meaning opening that we have, this introduction. So we go into this playful section. We're dancing around. It's a giant joke again. And then we eventually dissolve back into this contemplative section, this return. Except now it's ornamented. It's got a splash of color on it. It's behaved in a sense. So let's give a listen to that. Delightful, delightful. And then finally we get to the third movement, which is this minuet and trio. And it's perky, it's alive, it's playful. Again, you hear this call and response between the upper strings, and it has built-in pauses in the trio section, this middle section that's in the that interrupts the two outer segments. But these pauses that revert to this never-ending question that never finds what it's looking for. So it feels like it's always in search for something. So I'll let you hear that. But here's a little snippet of the third movement. Very fun music. And finally, we get to the last movement of Opus 18 number 2, the last of this string quartet. This one is a rondo, which means we have an idea, and then a diversion from this idea, and then return to the main idea, and then something completely new after that. And then this A theme, this first idea keeps coming back, and that's what ties the entire rondo together. But the theme, the first thing you're going to hear in this movement is actually derived from somewhere in the first movement. So he's taken this transitional material and actually crafted a bulk of the last movement from it. But it begins in the cello. It's very light, it's very quiet, and it feels restrained, even when everyone joins. But it unfolds with this plentiful, bountiful wit. And you eventually realize that the whole thing is just a joke or a gag. You know, it's all in good humor. There's even a section that I've heard is one described as a scene from an early black and white cartoon, which if you listen to it, you can completely picture that. If you imagine seeing a villain, and there's this train approaching in the background, and this worryful music, and then he's tying this dame to the tracks. You know, this early black and white sort of idea is embedded into this music. So listen for that moment, especially if you have these insistent notes in the accompaniment of the strings that sort of represent the oncoming train. And I think you'll actually hear part of that in the excerpt I'm going to play for you. But yeah, the whole movement and the whole quartet has this splashy G major ending. When it finally rediscovers the home key, and then it plays with this triad, over and over and over again. And it's setting up a lot of Beethoven's future music. Most of us are familiar with the monumental C minor symphony, his Fifth Symphony. Ba-ba-ba-bam. The ending of the Fifth Symphony is one of the longest endings, and it just takes a hammer and it pounds home that tonic key forever and ever and ever. And you can hear hints of that at the end of this quartet when he takes that G major and he just goes on and on and on until it finally has this very fast, a lot of notes in the strings, taking us all the way home to that last chord. The whole thing is clearly a tribute to Haydn, a tribute to his teacher and his remarkable legacy and wit. And there's even a quote, I'm not sure who said it, but this is the greatest string quartet that Haydn never wrote. So keep that in mind as you listen. Here is a little snippet of the last movement. Could you hear it? The moment where it goes into that dark sounding music, that minor music, that's sort of the evil mustachy section where you can just picture everything happening in the background. And then, of course, he resolves it just like nothing happened. He just throws it away. So that was, again, in his set of his first quartet. And then he went on. He took 6 years off from string quartet writing, but had 6 years of some of the most productive compositional in all genres except string quartets. And it was during that time that, of course, his deafness increased and it became more difficult to hide. And in 1802, 2 years after these quartets were finished, after the early quartets, that's when he wrote the famous Heiligenstadt Testament, when he professed that his world was very dark, that he had thoughts of suicide, but it was his art that kept him going. And fortunately for us, he did, and we saw things like his middle symphonies, and especially the Ninth Symphony and its message of unity and coming together, and everyone is in this brotherhood, and it's just some of the most amazing music. And I can't wait until we're able to do the Ninth Symphony. Of course, we were supposed to do it in May of this year, but that didn't happen. But it'll happen. Now, there's this one thing about the end of these quartets. He wrote, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, because he was going deaf and it was becoming all consuming for him. He wrote, "Let your deafness be no longer a secret, even in art." So that really, once he accepted it, once he came to this grasp of who he was and who he was going to be, he decided to make it part of his art. And we are eternally grateful. Happy birthday, Beethoven. Now, before I invite our executive director for a final few minutes here, I just wanted to show you what it's like behind the scenes, because it's very different than putting on a live concert. And we have our recording weekends. The one you're seeing premiering this week was recorded in the Chico Women's Club. Wonderful little venue, and we've done Old City Hall in Reading. So we meet for 3 days or so, and then I'm going to show you a short video that's behind the scenes on the process of editing, the process of putting it all together. So here we go. So I promised during our recent member Zoom that I would give a glimpse into the behind the scenes process that we are now embarking on, because we can't do live concerts. And so here I am at my workstation. So before I actually sit here, we have our recording weekends. During the recording weekends, I am behind the scenes, just rehearsing the ensemble for a little bit, but mostly while they're actually recording, I'm in a tiny little room with the audio engineer and the video person. And we have a screen similar to this with 5 or 6 different camera views. And my job during that is to actually switch the shots as the recording is taking place, using all of these different views so that we actually save time in the post-production process. That works for me because I know the music really well and I'm not actually conducting the ensemble. So it's a win-win in a way. And then once it's all recorded, it comes here, and then this is Final Cut Pro. And what we do here is we input all the video and the audio and in the interviews and things. And we actually put the video here, and then we upload the audio, and I have to line it up, and then I make all the adjustments, loud, soft, tone, color, all that kind of stuff with both elements of it. Add in the interviews, we add in transitions, which are found over here. So there's all kinds of things that go into this. And then once you are done, your completed concert video actually looks like this. You have the video segments, the audio segments, we have the transitions here, the little gray spots, we have all of the titles and subtitles and all of that stuff happening. These are the papers that I go through with all of the takes that we have during the live session. You can see we have hard drives galore, Zoom devices, cards strewn about, and one of the most important parts is the glass of port, but that's for a later part of the process. So this is what it looks like, and it takes at least 3 to 5 solid days of just me staring at the screen and listening to everything that's going on and making sure that we have a quality product to show you all. So thanks for taking a look with me in the behind the scenes process, and I hope you enjoy the concert coming up. And finally, I'm going to invite our executive director, and we're just going to chat about this year's end and about our memberships. So I'm going to invite Elizabeth. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, Scott.
Well, welcome to our pre-concert talk. A little bit different. I never thought I would give a pre-talk next to my Christmas tree, but
my Christmas tree is right there.
I can see it in the reflection. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
But as we have talked about in previous talks, it's such a huge process to get here, and it's been a big reimagining period for us. And the past few months have been unique. And we're hoping that 2021 starts to show a lot of change, and we really, really hope to be able to do live performances, either in the summer or hopefully in the fall for our 21st season. 21, that means that we're currently in our 20th season, as we all know, which is a big celebration. And, part of this process for us, for continuing to serve our communities in Chico and Redding and everything in between, is not only providing all of our most of our content for free, and partnering with public access stations and getting everything on YouTube, which is accessible to hopefully everyone. But we don't have subscriptions right now. People can't pick their seats. We can't. So we've transitioned our subscriptions to memberships, and these are so important right now. And we're not quite at our goal yet, but our goal is to have everyone who was a subscriber in our live seasons to now become a member. And you have some perks to be a member of the North State Symphony. And one of those perks is you get additional bonus performances that are sent to you that no one else gets to see. It's not on our YouTube channel, at least for the general public. So you get to see things like me playing saxophone, which is a rarity nowadays. So you got to pay to see that. But you also get some unique projects that we've put together. For instance, one of our member-only concert premieres in October was a wonderful arrangement of a piece by a composer named Melitz, where we had one of our board members and symphony musicians, Eric Whitmer, piece together everyone who's been recorded this video in their home. And then Eric spliced it all together to come up with this amazing final product. And so that's just a taste of what you get if you purchase a membership to the symphony. But you also get things like the Just Ask series, which we've continued from our live concerts. You get things like Cracking the Score, which is me delving into detail into the great pieces of classical music. You get our musician accents interviews. So it's really quite a lot. And again, super, super critical to keep music going during these crazy is an understatement. These crazy times that we are living. So, Elizabeth, any other thoughts about that?
Oh, it's been such a treat to compile all of these projects that we are doing. We've done a few of them in the past, like the musician interviews, and we've shifted them to this virtual format and added new content to what we're being able to offer to not just members, but to everyone throughout the entire season. And it's really quite a lot of stuff, and it really takes teamwork between a lot of it is on Scott tremendously, and the rest of the staff and the musicians and the team here at North State Symphony to coordinate everything. So, please check out our website and our social media pages. We're glad that you're joining us tonight for the pre-concert talk, and there's a lot going on, and there's more in the works for sure.
So part of this talk was, if you have any questions, anything you wanted to ask, we're more than happy if you're at a computer right now and you want to type those to us. Otherwise, even after the live session has ended, feel free to continue shooting those questions, and we will obviously try to get back to you as soon as we possibly can. We have a question from Carol Quivy. And, oops,
There it is. Oh, she asked how close we were how close we were to our North State Symphony membership goal, and I believe it's a little over 30% of our. We're sort of basing it off of like what our season ticket holders were versus what our memberships are now, and we're about 30% there. Yeah. And the neat thing about our memberships is that you can purchase them at any time this season, so there's no expiration on them. You can buy them at any time from our wonderful friends at the University box office. They're available online at chicostatetickets.com, through northstatesymphony.org, or you can call 898-6333, and I'll try to post some of those details in the chat here, just to keep up with everything. But yeah, we're getting close to our goal. It's nice to see it go up as the weeks and months go by.
And a note about that is, because things are so different right now, even when you become a member mid-season or even later in the season, you still have access to everything we've already done in the early part of the season. So it's not like you missed out on anything. You're going to be sent all of that stuff, and you can watch it on demand at your leisure. So there's really no timeline for this, except we do need your help, sooner than later. So please keep that in mind as you're thinking about year-end tax, tax write-offs and contributing to your favorite nonprofits and arts organizations. But again, we couldn't do any of this without all of you, without our incredible sponsors, and our wonderful patrons, and everyone who enjoys live music and comes to our concerts, but is also joining us online now. You are making a huge difference in the presence of music in the North State. So thank you so much for all that you do, and to everyone who's helped out in some way, especially over the past few months. So we won't take any more of your time. We want to thank you all for joining us for this very special Beethoven 250 pre-concert talk. We can't wait to see everyone on Thursday, the 24th of December, for our virtual premiere on Christmas Eve at 7 p.m. Bring your kids, because we won't keep you up too late. It's only an hour. And again, there is a nice little holiday surprise at the end. If anyone is listening who has come to our past holiday concerts, part of that surprise, you probably know what it is and can expect that fully. So I'm not going to say any more about that, but you have to tune in.
It's funny.
Yeah, it is funny or cheesy in some way, something like that. But also our unique little contest / game at the beginning, which even if you don't participate, come and enjoy this very condensed look at a lot of Beethoven's music throughout his entire life. It's really cool to have that snapshot that, oh my God, this is the beginning and that's the middle and that's the end, to hear how vastly different it all is and how he progressed and matured as the great composer. So again, thank you all, and have a great evening, and we'll see you Thursday.
See you Thursday.
Bye-bye.